What if one marketing campaign was so successful that it almost destroyed the company behind it? In 1992, Hoover made British customers an offer that was almost impossible to refuse. Spend £100 on Hoover products and receive 2 free return flights. At first, the offer was for destinations across Europe. Then the company did something even more insane. It started offering 2 free flights to the United States. The problem? Those tickets were worth several times more than the vacuum cleaner customers had to buy. Hoover's executives were convinced they had created the perfect scheme. They believed the complicated terms would discourage most customers from actually claiming the tickets, but they made one catastrophic mistake. They underestimated their customers. People started buying vacuum cleaners not because they needed them, but because they wanted the free flights, and what was supposed to save Hoover's sales soon became one of the most infamous marketing disasters in corporate history. To understand how Hoover came up with the idea, we need to go back to the beginning of the 1990s. Hoover's British business was already in serious trouble. Europe was experiencing a recession, consumers were spending less, competition from cheaper manufacturers was increasing, and Hoover's warehouses were filled with unsold products. The company desperately needed to increase sales, but management didn't want to simply cut prices because that could damage the brand's image. So the marketing department was given a simple task. How could Hoover make people buy more without turning itself into a discount brand? The answer was an unusual promotion. Hoover offered customers 2 free airline tickets when they spent a certain amount on Hoover products. Customers had to complete paperwork, follow strict deadlines, and provide possible travel dates and airports. Hoover's executives were counting on one simple thing: most people wouldn't bother. On paper, the strategy looked reasonable. Hoover would increase sales, clear unwanted inventory, and only a small percentage of customers would actually claim the expensive reward. But the opposite happened. People quickly realized how valuable the offer was. News about the free flights spread across Britain. Customers started clearing Hoover products from store shelves, and some people were buying vacuum cleaners purely to qualify for the tickets. They didn't care whether they actually needed a vacuum cleaner. The real prize was the flight. Hoover's sales exploded. But then Hoover made the biggest mistake of the entire story. Instead of stopping the promotion, the company expanded it. Now customers could receive 2 free return flights to the United States, New York, Orlando. For customers, the deal became almost impossible to ignore. Spend around £100 on Hoover products and receive airline tickets worth several times more. At that point, people understood exactly what was happening. Hoover wasn't really selling vacuum cleaners anymore. It was selling cheap flights with a vacuum cleaner attached. People bought the cheapest Hoover products they could find just to qualify for the tickets. Some resold the vacuum cleaners, while others gave them away or never even opened the boxes. The logic behind Hoover's original plan had completely collapsed. The company expected people to forget about the promotion. Instead, customers fought for their right to receive the promised tickets. Hoover had expected tens of thousands of applications. Instead, more than 200,000 people eventually applied for the flights. That's when Hoover's management finally understood the scale of the disaster. The company simply wasn't prepared to handle that many claims. Panic began, and additional travel agencies had to be brought in to process the applications. Then an even bigger problem appeared. Hoover began placing more restrictions on customers. Some were given inconvenient travel dates, others were offered inconvenient airports, and applications could be rejected because of mistakes in the paperwork. Customers believed the company was trying to deceive them after attracting them with the promise of free travel. And then the real scandal began. Angry customers started contacting the media, consumer organizations, and courts. What had started as a simple advertising campaign had become a reputational disaster. Hoover was no longer associated only with vacuum cleaners. Its name had become associated with a promise the company couldn't properly deliver. But the financial consequences were even worse. Hoover's parent company, Maytag, had to step in and spend huge amounts of money dealing with the consequences of the promotion. Several executives connected to the failed campaign lost their positions. Hoover's British business suffered reputational damage that it would never completely recover from. And the most incredible part is that the original idea actually worked. Sales increased, customers came, products were sold. The problem was that the promotion worked too well. Hoover created an offer so attractive that the company itself couldn't handle the consequences of its own success. And that's the biggest lesson from the Hoover disaster. A marketing campaign isn't successful simply because it attracts customers. A company also has to understand what will happen if the offer becomes wildly popular. Hoover thought it could outsmart its customers. It expected people to get confused by the rules and give up. But the opposite happened. Customers studied the rules, found ways to maximize the deal, and forced the company to honor its own promises. In the end, the marketing campaign that was supposed to save Hoover's sales became one of the most famous corporate failures in history. And the irony is that Hoover didn't lose because its promotion failed. It lost because the promotion worked. What do you think? What was Hoover's biggest mistake? Launching the promotion in the first place, or expanding it to include free flights to the United States? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy stories about the rise and fall of famous companies, subscribe to the Rise Lab. See you in the next story.